بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In a previous video, I spoke about Israel's war on Gaza. The brutality, I referred to the brutality, genocide, mass killing that everybody now is aware of. But my focus wasn't really on that specifically. It was more about the damage it was and has been causing the whole world in terms of destroying the moral standards in the world, because Israel has managed in a way that has never happened before to convince so many governments, organizations, interest groups, individuals, celebrities, you name it, to support what's doing. Something that has, as I said, never happened before. So in that video, I discussed the damage Israel has been causing to the world, moral damage to the world. But of course, the main victims remain at this point in time, the Palestinians who are being destroyed, killed, made destitute in their hundreds of thousands, of course. In this video, however, I would like to focus on the root cause of this Israeli brutality. How did it come to be, and how can it continue the way it's doing? It's just against common sense, really, but it does. And I would like to start by saying that usually it's very common to look at the situation in Israel and say, well, this is Israel being the aggressor and supported by America, and America is allowing Israel to go on this campaign of terror, state terror, which is in some way obviously is true, but I think putting it this way actually conflates the cause with the effect, and or what I would say the disease and the symptom. In order to actually more accurately understand why Israel is able to do what's doing, where does all of this terror and support for terrorists come from, we need to go back not to ancient Israel, some over 2,000 years ago, as some actually do, not even to the 19th century, to the 20th century, when Israel was established. The modern Israel was established, but actually we need to go somewhere in between. More specifically, we need to go back to the 17th century, more or less. And we don't need to go to Palestine or the Holy Land, but actually we need to go to America. America is the birthplace of what I consider to be the most dangerous supremacy that the world has ever seen, which I would call American supremacy. This supremacy is the real cause of the global problem that Israel has come to be. It's a problem including a big moral challenge to the whole world, as I explained in the previous video. Now, before I speak specifically about American supremacy and the damage it's been doing to the world, its history, etc., I would like just to clarify a kind of difference between these kind of related terms, racism and supremacy. They are often used interchangeably, for obvious reasons. There are lots of similarities, but there are also significant differences. Racism, the term, usually refers to discrimination against a particular group of people. So there is racism against black people. This is well known. Antisemitism is a form of racism. Islamophobia, of course, is a form of racism as well. Supremacy is a different kind of ideology. Supremacy usually is defined in terms of the group that adopts that particular ideology. So the well-known white supremacists believe that the white race are superior, etc., to others. By definition and by default, and as a consequence, everybody else is othered. So you start in racism, the focus of the term is on the victims, whereas in the case of supremacy, the focus of the term is actually on the culprit, the supremacist. Of course, we hear all the time in the news about the rise in far-right groups in Europe and elsewhere these days. These are all, a lot of them represent forms of supremacist ideologies. Probably the most well-known example is the Ku Klux Klan, and which this particular group went through 3 phases of growth and decline in its history. Today there are only a few thousands of them. Of course, we're talking in America here, but actually in the mid-30s, the Ku Klux Klan had around 4 million people, Americans, who claimed to be members of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, to put that in perspective, that's about 3.5% of the US population at the time. But actually, estimates of the real size of its membership vary, some suggesting that it was as much as double that number. Difficult to tell, but the point here is that it was very significant. However, as I said, there are only a few thousands left of the Ku Klux Klan. But now compare this with the American supremacy that I'm going to talk about. In 2009, a survey by the Institute for Global Affairs found that 42.4% of Americans think that America is exceptional because of what it represents. That's the values, etc. And another 18.2% believe that it is exceptional for what it has done for the world. As ridiculous as it sounds, that is actually what the survey found. Now, these figures have been declined, so if you go back in history, you'll find that the figures are higher, but still, put them together, and we are talking about 61% of Americans who believe, and it's a belief, who believe that America is exceptional in one way or another. This is what's known as American exceptionalism. And I would like actually here to speak a little bit about President Barack Obama. And the reason I want to say a few things about him, because he is obviously, of all the presidents in modern history, in recent history anyway, he is highly intellectual, has more profound thinking than any of them. I don't think anybody would argue that he's not more intellectual than Donald Trump or George W. Bush. Of course he is. But the reason I mention him here is that even Barack Obama couldn't actually kind of get rid himself of this concept of American exceptionalism. In fact, an article in the Washington Post in 2015 said that concluded that no American president has talked about American exceptionalism more often and in more varied ways than Obama. I'm going to just read a couple of things here. I'm going to read first from his autobiography. And this is what he wrote. The pride in being American, the notion that America was the greatest country on earth, that was always a given. As a young man, I chaffed against books that dismissed the notion of American exceptionalism. got into long, drawn-out arguments with friends who insisted then that American hegemon was the root of oppression worldwide. So you can see the American exceptionalism is a concept that he, or a belief he had from his young age. And actually, without that belief, you can't make it in American politics. So he had to have this belief. But obviously, being more intellectual, he actually struggled at times with this idea. And because he knew too much, and he knew what America had done and it's been doing to the world, which can be, described as immoral, brutal, destructive, you name it. And so what's interesting is that in 2009, in a news conference, he said the following: "I believe in American exceptionalism, just I suspect that the Brits believe in British exceptionalism and the Greeks believe in Greek exceptionalism." Obviously, you wouldn't be surprised if I told you that he was immediately attacked for saying that. Now, this is clearly a form of really double speak. So he's trying to say American is exceptional, but really it isn't exceptional. And that was a moment probably of honesty on his part, where the honesty being in conceding that America was not exceptional if you're thinking morally. It definitely isn't. And when he compared it to Britain and Greece, obviously that kind of did away completely with what American exceptionalism is, as understood over the centuries by just numerous, countless Americans. So he was attacked, and as a result, he changed his language. And then he went back to speak about American exceptionalism the way he should be speaking about. And as an example here, I've got from 2014, so that's 5 years after that news conference, he said in an address he gave at the U.S. Military Academy, "I believe in American exceptionalism with every fiber of my being." Just not the words and the language. "But what makes us exceptional is not our ability to flout international norms and the rule of the law. It's our willingness to affirm them through our actions." Of course, what he's saying here makes no sense, because America is the biggest breaker of international law. But he's a politician, and he has to say the right things. And the right things is what the people you care about are going to accept. And the people that he cared about included 62% of them who believed that America was exceptional. So he had to speak to them. And so he had to change his language. And as I noted earlier, the Washington Post said that he was the president that used the expression, American exceptionalism more than anyone else. Now, I mentioned earlier that there has been an increase in far-right movements, including political parties in Europe in particular, who have been winning seats actually, so gaining power that would give them the ability to implement their ideologies. But there's something to note about them when we think about them and compare them with American exceptionalism, or American supremacy, as I call it. Those far-right ideologies are really often local, focused on their own internal affairs. And also, they are kind of limited in scope, and often they do not kind of include the aspiration or the right to go outside their countries and interfere in the affairs of other people. They don't do that. Often they're focused on how to protect their countries, as I see it, from those incoming immigrants or other kind of ethnic people, Muslims who live there, etc. That is a very significant difference between American exceptionalism, American supremacy, and those supremacist ideologies, because America implements its ideology across the world. So it's particularly dangerous because, by definition, American supremacy is actually not about America alone. It's about America and the rest of the world. And obviously the other factor that makes it particularly dangerous is that America is the only superpower. It's the only superpower that has also this kind of devastating form of supremacy that looks at the whole world at its legitimate domain. This is why American supremacy is actually the first of its kind and the most dangerous that we have ever seen. Now, where did this American supremacy come from? We can actually trace it back to as early as 1930, when the Puritans arrived from England to New England in America. One of their leaders gave a sermon. It's not actually clear whether he gave it even in England before they left to America or on the ship that took them there. His name is John Winthrop, and he ended up being one of the founders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. This is one of the 13 American colonies that, in about 140 years or so, started the American Revolution against the British, and which led to American independence. Anyway, so he was one of the founders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And he, in his sermon, this particularly famous sermon, he said the following. He said, for talking to his fellow Puritans, and he said, for we must consider that we shall be a city upon a hill. And that expression, city upon a hill, is an expression that he borrowed from Matthew chapter 5, verse 14. It's from a sermon by Jesus, actually, in which he said, you are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. So he borrowed it from there. And that became a very famous phrase that obviously what it reflects the influence of the immigrants, those immigrants, the Puritans, but others as well, other European immigrants who were Christian, very much influenced by the Bible and very much influenced by the history of the Israelites in the Bible, being the chosen people of God who were given a new land, a holy land. So it's not really because they're such believers in this ethnocentric history that you find in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible. It's not a kind of a huge jump to see how those early immigrants started to see themselves and their immigration move to America as a recreation of the story of Israel. And this has been kind of a concept that used throughout American history. It's usually, like I say, traced back to the Puritans, but it never disappeared, and it was actually stressed, affirmed, confirmed over time, over and over again. For instance, President Abraham Lincoln in 1861 said about, described the Americans as God's almost chosen people. He was a bit careful there. He wasn't actually very religious early in his life, but he became more religious later on. And then we ended up with him actually using this very religious, biblical language. However, he qualified it a little bit with almost chosen people. Actually, hardly anybody afterwards would use almost. It's chosen people. And that particular expression, city on a hill, that John Winthrop used, became quite common, referred to every now and then. But nobody used it as many times probably as Ronald Reagan. But then Ronald Reagan didn't find it good enough, so he had to embellish it a little bit more. So he used the expression shining city on a hill, just in case being on a hill is not enough to be visible to everybody. No, let's make it shining. So it was, and it is, shining city on a hill. And he used this even in just throughout his really political career. Now, it's very important to stress here that this concept, the Americans being the chosen people of God, being exceptional, is not a concept that developed as a result of America developing, being more successful. The later became very successful, of course, economically, technologically, militarily. It's very successful. So it wasn't a concept that developed as a result of Americans looking at their success, the success of their nation, and saying, well, we must be special. No. As I mentioned, this started as early as European immigrants started to arrive in America. It's a self-belief. It has nothing to do with any kind of what America achieved. So it had not achieved anything yet they were the chosen people of God. And when it ended up achieving so much in terms of success, admittedly, but also destruction around the world, that belief never changed, because it was not actually linked to what America was going to do. It was just a belief that was a group of people invented about themselves, linked to their religious belief, and they adopted. So it stayed always there. Doesn't matter what happens, America is exceptional, even to Barak Obama. This is actually the real link between America and Israel. So it's the history of the Israelites as preserved in the Hebrew Bible, and the self-image of the American being the new chosen people of God, that actually link these two nations. Americans would say, often politicians would say, oh, we share the same values. Well, no, that's nothing to do with values. When Americans came to, the first immigrants went to America, what values did they have? Well, there was nothing that had developed by then. And also, if you look at the history of the modern state of Israel and America, the only thing they share in terms of values is actually the lack of any moral standards, moral behaviors, and moral constraints. Brutality, masculine, genocide. If these are values, then yes, America and Israel share values. But obviously these are not values. No one would be proud and call them values, not even the Israelis and the Americans. So the real mythological link between Israel and America was actually invented by Americans who borrowed the imagery from the Hebrew Bible about the Israelites and applied that to themselves. That where this kind of strong link came from. So really what we're talking about is effectively an act of plagiarism. American supremacy is based on plagiarism of really two major themes you find in the Hebrew Bible. The first is the chosenness of a people by God, and in the case of the Hebrew Bible, it's the Israelites. The Americans took this theme, applied it to themselves, and they became the new chosen people of God. And the second theme, which is kind of linked to the first, is the concept of a holy land or a promised land. So in the Bible, Hebrew Bible, the Israelites were promised by God to give them the Holy Land in Palestine. And here in America, Americans then described their new land as the promised land. The terminology is very close, very similar. Not exactly holy, but it is a promised land. So they are the new chosen people for the new promised land. Now the Jews can claim they are the chosen people of God, and they can make a claim to Palestine on the basis of the Hebrew Bible. Now, put aside the fact that the Hebrew Bible is an ethnocentric book written exactly to deliver this kind of benefit for its believers. But at least they can actually refer to something historical and say, well, this is the source of our belief. Americans have no source of belief. The belief about their exceptionalism just comes from their own belief. Basically, they can only quote themselves if that is actually legitimate to do. Those Americans, early Americans, and the Americans in the kind of later generations, effectively plagiarized the ideas of chosenness and promised land, just like they stole the land from its native inhabitants. There's another concept that we all hear about America, which is the concept of founding fathers. This was first used by a senator called Warren Harding in 1916, but he used it later on, 5 years later, when he became president as well. And it refers obviously to 7 major figures in the history of American Revolution. Now, the concept of founding fathers is very reminiscent of the concept of patriarchs of the Hebrew Bible. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who later was named Israel. Now, I haven't kind of come across direct reference between these two. Possibly somebody might have noticed. Well, I haven't seen that. But the concept is just the idea that it looks, the expression fathers is so similar, again, to the concept of patriarchs in the Hebrew Bible. Having said that, the founding fathers were seen actually as religious figures. Give you an example. After the death of George Washington, the first president, obviously, and the leader of the American Revolution and War of Independence, many Americans imagined him as a prophet, or even he was depicted as Jesus. He was also called American Joshua. Now, obviously, Joshua is Moses' assistant. Again, as you can see, the theme is the same. We go back to the Bible, copy from the Bible, Hebrew Bible, project that on ourselves, and we Americans can claim anything that happened there to be applicable to us as well. So Joshua is the assistant of Moses, who, according to the Bible, committed genocide in Palestine. And obviously, genocide is not a concept that remote from those early Americans, because it was part of their daily life as they were extending their control and ownership of land and taking more from the native population there. But I'm going to read actually one particular passage from the Bible which talks about what supposedly Joshua did in Jericho, when the conquest of Jericho. And this comes from Joshua book 6, chapter 6, verse 21. Then they devoted to destruction by the edge of the sword, all in the city, both men and women, young and old, oxen, sheep, and donkeys. So that's a figure to liken George Washington to. Now, I don't really, as everybody knows, the Hebrew Bible is not particularly a reliable historical source. So these kind of genocides some of them might have happened. I obviously would not accept that a close assistant of Moses would have committed suicide. I would not accept that. But like I say, it's, the Hebrew Bible is kind of inaccurate and reliable as a historical source. But that's not really the point here. The point is that there are people who believe that these things happen. And when you believe in genocide that happened, and justified that happened in ancient history, and then you find it actually something you would be proud to link your current history to, then you've got a big problem. And unfortunately, the world has a big problem as well. Now, chosen people of God, promised land, etc., are not the only terms that have been, and imageries that have been used by Americans, mirroring what they've learned from the Bible. They have called themselves the New Israel. So America is the New Israel, the new nation of Israel. They've used also the term of Redeemer nation. So a nation that's there with a kind of a message and a purpose for the rest of the world, to save the rest of the world. That's what America is. It's a Redeemer nation. Chosen people, New Israel, Redeemer nation. And you've got the whole kind of suite of expressions, concepts, borrowed from the Bible, plagiarized from the Hebrew Bible, and conferred on the Americans by the Americans themselves. During the War of Independence from the British rule, American politicians and religious leaders regularly and often borrowed even the story of the exodus of the Israelites from ancient Egypt under the leadership of Moses. So they compared actually their struggle against the British and their struggle for independence to the exodus of the Israelites who escaped the dictatorship and the brutality of Pharaoh. In fact, King George III was even presented as a pharaoh. That is, he was a pharaoh of the American Revolution. And of course, the American Revolution was the new Exodus. So what you have here is that the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, was being reread to be about America as well, not about Israel. And the fact that it just completely, this claim, this belief, it's just void of any historical basis. It's indefensible on the basis of facts. However, this self-image came with immense emotional commitment and zeal. It never lost that, and it continued to have them, and unfortunately to the detriment of the whole world. Now, chosenness of the Jews, as I said, is inseparably linked to them having some kind of having Palestine as a homeland, and of course this is the source and foundation of American self-appointment as the chosen nation. So protecting the chosenness of the Jews now, and more specifically Zionism. Zionism is the right of the Jews, the concept that the Jews have the right to go back and have a homeland in Palestine. So protecting Zionism became then a protection of American chosenness. This is actually the main link again that we see between the US and Israel. In order for the American self-image of being the chosen people of God to continue, then it's almost proved by the Jews being the chosen people of God and going back to the land they claimed to be theirs. In more recent times, kind of Christianity, Christian faith in the US, its influence has been kind of going down, still very strong there. But Christianity in the US, as in the rest of the world, has been in decline. And it's not anymore necessarily a significant part of the lives of so many people. As a result, is actually then the term exceptionalism kind of started to be used more instead of chosenness. Chosenness is more of a kind of religious, has a lot of clear or religious connotation, whether exceptionalism is a secular term that's not necessarily linked to any kind of religious background. However, of course, the history of the whole concept is actually religious, regardless of what you call it. That's how it started and how it came into being. Otherwise, nobody would have thought of themselves as the chosen people of God. And of course, exceptionalism means that America is unique. It's superior to the rest of the world. Everybody is inferior to America. And then it also comes with the rights and responsibility to spread to the rest of the world what it considers to be the highest values. So American exceptionalism is the same supremacy that American chosenness is. However, it's been recast in non-religious, non-biblical terms. Because of, as I mentioned earlier, because of American exceptionalism isn't about America. It's partly about America, but it's actually about the whole world. It is extremely dangerous. It is the most dangerous form of supremacy. Again, it is unlike really anything we have seen in the world. And as I mentioned earlier, as a result, America is a big supporter of Zionism. So let me talk a little bit about Zionism and how America is linked to this ideology. The first Zionist Congress was held in Basel in Switzerland in 1897. And it defined Zionism and said that Zionism strives to create for the Jewish people a home in Palestine secured by public law. This particular concept obviously started by Jews in Europe, started slowly in the late 19th century, But it actually received a huge kind of impetus in November 1917, when the British government issued what's known as the Balfour Declaration. Balfour Declaration, which is kind of named after the United Kingdom Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour. This was issued in a letter from Balfour to Lord Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community. In that, it promised the Jews a land in Palestine. Now, what's interesting, at the time of this declaration in 1917, the native non-Jewish population formed over 90% of the population. The non-Jews were over 90% of the population. But that obviously was irrelevant to the British, who decided that they would give the Jews a land there. Because of that kind of injustice, this particular declaration used to be described as the promise of those who do not own to those who do not deserve. So the British giving Palestinian land to people who did not live there, and we were ultimately will have to immigrate to the land they were given before they arrived to it. Zionism, in this sense, is a settler colonialism, which is exactly how America was established. There's absolutely no difference between the two. Immigrants coming from other countries, parts of the world, to a particular land and claiming it to be theirs and kicking out the native population. That is settler colonialism. You can see it in America and you can see it in Palestine. It's exactly the same. Now, the fact that the Balfour Declaration was made in 1917 does not mean that this is when support for Zionism, political support for Zionism, started. Not really. I'm going to give some kind of examples, in particular from American presidents who supported Zionism, and I'll try to show how old this support, how early, and how earlier than the Balfour Declaration. So I'm going to start with an example from John Adams. He's one of the founding fathers of America, and then later became the second president. So he wrote a letter to Zionist, and one of probably the most known Jewish person in America, called Mordecai Noah. And in that letter, he wrote to him the following. Did you imagine? This is an American president, or at the time he wasn't really, but this is from an American founding father. And he said, he's talking to this Jewish leader, to wish that you had been at the head of 100,000 Israelites, indeed as well disciplined as a French army, and marching with them into Judea and making a conquest of that country and restoring your nation to the dominion of it. For I really wish the Jews again in Judea, an independent nation, for as I believe the most enlightened men of it have participated in the amelioration of the philosophy of the age, once restored to an independent government and no longer persecuted, they would soon wear away some of the asperities and peculiarities of their character. So he couldn't stop himself from criticizing still. Possibly in time become liberal Unitarian Christians, For your Jehovah is our Jehovah, and your God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is our God. That was John Adams writing in 1819, a whole century before the Balfour Declaration. Another example, this is from Abraham Lincoln, and he wrote in 1963, he was replying to a Zionist, and he said, restoring the Jews to their national home in Palestine is a noble dream and one shared by many Americans. He's talking about on behalf of other Americans. Then this is another quote from Woodrow Wilson, and he was president, and this comes president of the US, of course. And in 1919, he wrote, he said to the Jewish leaders in America, quote, "I'm moreover persuaded that the allied nations, with the fullest concurrence of our own government and people, are agreed that in Palestine shall be laid the foundations of a Jewish commonwealth." Another one from Theodore Roosevelt, and he declared that one of the Allies' peace conditions should be, that's after the First World War, should be that Palestine must be made a Jewish state. Now he's talking about the whole of Palestine. Harry Truman, in 1945, he said, we want to let as many of the Jews into Palestine as it is possible. So that's for you the commitment of one president after another to Zionism. And this continued and changed. If anything, it got stronger and stronger. Now I want to stop here. I've been talking about American supremacy, American exceptionalism, American chosenness, all of them expressions of the same thing, same supremacist ideology. But there's a particular term that I would like to stop at and really critique, which is Jewish supremacy. This is used not that often, but it is used at times to refer to Israel and what's doing and what's behind Zionism, etc., all of that. I really think this is a misnomer. Obviously, we know that some, and indeed many, Jews don't believe in Zionism, and in fact some of them are anti-Zionism. But the main point here as well is that it's this concept, the concept of they are referring obviously to the Hebrew Bible and ancient Israel, and that belief. Well, that's really of limited influence anyway. Had it been effective, had Jewish supremacy, as they call it, if it was effective, you wouldn't have had anti-Semitism in Europe everywhere. In America, that wouldn't have happened if it was that kind of effective. It wasn't. So there's no question there are people who believe in it, but it's really irrelevant. In my view, it's nothing more than like a historical myth. It may exist. Some people may believe in it, but it is completely irrelevant. It's and like I say, had it been of any influence, we would not have had anti-Semitism. And that takes me back to the point I raised earlier. When we try to understand what happened, what Israel, the phenomenon now that's become this, the kind of the damages it's been doing, the action it's been taking. When you look at it, it is important to understand what it is. It is an outcome. It is not the cause. It's an outcome of another supremacy, which is American supremacy. Otherwise, Israel would not have been able to do any of what it's been doing. But of course, what's really kind of quite ironic is that this cooperation between religious American Protestants, mainly Zionists I'm talking here, and Zionist, Jewish Zionists, is that both of them believe that the establishment of the State of Israel would kind of speed up the coming of the Messiah. The problem is they are talking about different messiahs. The Jews, of course, the Christians are talking about the return of Jesus. So Jesus would return, and that's the Messiah they're talking about, because there has been one Messiah for them, and that's the Messiah they care about and they expect to come back. The Jews, on the other hand, they think Jesus was a liar and he got what he deserved, because they believe they crucified him. Obviously, we as Muslims don't believe he was crucified. And so they are actually, the Messiah they're waiting for is a different Messiah. It's the real Messiah for them. Look at this kind of unholy alliance. And if that absurdity is not enough, then you have some Christian Zionists being anti-Semitic as well. Work this out. That's what happens when you have confusion of ideas and beliefs that have no roots in history and reality, and where the focus is on mutual interest rather than in principles and values. America effectively created modern Israel and maintained it. America sees the creation of Israel, as all the Zionists, as proof of the Bible. By being proof of the Bible, it's also proof of Americans' self-image, the image of chosenness, promised land, exceptionalism. America needs Israel to exist in the same way that Israel cannot exist without America. They need each other for different reasons. America needs Israel as evidence, proof, confirmation of its mythical self-image. Israel needs America to recreate its ancient history in the Bible. They have different objectives, but they still have managed to kind of have the same different objectives, but they have commonality between them. Both of them need Zionism. As a result, in order to kind of protect Israel, America has to kind of extend its exceptionalism to Israel. So what happened is that America has exceptionalized Israel. And that's in keeping, frankly, with the ethnocentric history of the Bible, which revolves around the Israelites. So the Israelites are actually exceptional in the Bible. And I am going to look at three particular examples how America, and of course its allies, I'm not talking about America, but the focus here, America, because America is the root cause. Without America, none of this would have happened. History would have been very, very different. And so the three examples I'm going to look at are Zionism, anti-Semitism, and the Holocaust. And let me start by Zionism. And I'm going to show how these three concepts, incidents, if you like, have been exceptionalized, have been kind of receiving special treatment. So Zionism, let's start with Zionism. As I said, it's a claim by a particular ethnic group to land that their ancestors lived on 2,000 years ago. There's no other example in the world, in history, of anybody trying to actually do something like that. So taking back people who lived 2,000 years ago to the land they were on. How do you do that? Who these people are? How do you identify? That's a different story. But nobody would, even no sane person would think that is actually something doable. So to start with, the concept of Zionism is exceptional. To try and make it happen, you're actually doing something it had not done before and nobody tried to do. But let me talk about another aspect of it. In 1975, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution number 3379 that declared that Zionism is a form of racism and racial discrimination. Let me repeat that. That's not actually a resolution by some Arab League. It was not issued by Muslims. It was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. So that's not under the control of America to veto it. And it stated that Zionism is a form of racism and racial discrimination. 72 countries voted in support of this description of Zionism. 35 voted against and 32 abstained. So even if you put together those who abstained and those who voted against the resolution would still pass, because it's over half of those countries voting for it. That was in 1975. But in 1991, specifically in December, that same General Assembly revoked Resolution 3379. So nullified it. Didn't say anything. There was no justification, no explanation, no nothing. Just said 15 years ago, 16 years ago, whatever, we issued a resolution. Now we've decided to just abolish it. We revoked it. The reason it was revoked, remember it was adopted because of the majority. When it was revoked by 111 countries supporting it, 25 only objecting to it, and only 13 abstaining. So the countries that supported it are probably more than 3 times put together those who objected to it and those who abstained. So the world didn't change much really in 16 years, did it? People didn't change much. So what happened? Well, very simple. During that time, the world changed in terms of the governing powers. It used to be, has 2 kinds of powers balancing each other, talking about the Soviet Union and the countries that supported it, and obviously America and the West. In the meantime, during that time, in those 16 years, of course, the Soviet Union disappeared. And we ended up with America being the only superpower. The 1991 revoking of the earlier resolution by the General Assembly was simply the result of American pressure. Nothing more, nothing less. The free world, the world without the pressure, early on, 15 years, 16 years earlier, voted and described Zionism for what it is, racism, straightforward racism. Then 16 years later, the world changed its view, and the only reason is America had become the only superpower by then. In those 16 years, Israel had continued to steal land from its native people, from the Palestinians, only confirming the racist, brutal nature of Zionism. Again, if anything, history was confirming what Zionism is and what the General Assembly resolution described it at. But obviously, America decided otherwise. The world has to follow suit. If a new resolution actually was going to be free, totally free, it would have just described Zionism in even stronger terms. But obviously, America would always have it its way. What's interesting here is that Native Americans suffered from the American Revolution, because Native Americans used kind of to play the French and the British against each other, and they had actually some protection, land protection by the British. But after the American Revolution, that protection was gone, and they really fell at the mercy of the American settlers, and they knew no mercy. This is exactly the scenario that happened to the Palestinians here. When the world became controlled by only one superpower, that balance is gone, and the Palestinians suffered exactly what the Native Americans suffered after the American Revolution, when there was no balancing power anymore in America. And obviously history would tell you that the Treaty of Paris in 1783 gave the United States lands that used to be reserved actually for the indigenous, but that's gone. The point here is that Zionism could not have been turned into reality, or could not have delivered what it's designed to, without the promotion and support of the US. So that was Zionism, and how America exceptionalized it and normalized it. What about anti-Semitism? Now, like any form of racism, which is what anti-Semitism is, it's abhorrent. And it's only right to call it out, to fight it off, and to try and stop it anywhere, everywhere. But it is wrong to exceptionalize it. Islamophobia is another form of racism. Islamophobia is many-fold more widespread than anti-Semitism. We know of whole communities, Rohingya, in Kashmir, in China. You have whole communities, not only individuals. So in sheer numbers, Islamophobia is much worse. The scale of Islamophobia is far, far greater than anti-Semitism. Yet, anti-Semitism always, even by the law in Western countries, Western democracies, I should say, is treated exceptionally. It's different, as if it's worse than any other, than Islamophobia. It's worse than other forms of racism. And so exceptionalizing anti-Semitism is really effectively turning, it is a form of supremacy. Why anti-Semitism is just has to be looked at as more harmful, more dangerous. It is harmful and dangerous, but like any other racism. In terms of numbers, it's not as you know, it's not hurting as many people, absolutely not as Islamophobia. Now, I'm personally against exceptionalizing any form of racism. I wouldn't want Islamophobia to be special form of racism. That's not a human value anybody should have, really. But the point is, all forms of racism should be treated the same. Of course, the term anti-Semitism was designed by a Jewish person, by an Austrian Jewish scholar in 1860. His name is Moritz Steinschneider in 1860. And then it was picked up and made more popular in a pamphlet by a German agitator and publicist called Wilhelm Marr in 1879. And that's when it kind of developed its connotation. But obviously it was coined by a Jewish person. Now here's a problem I have with that. Semite, the word Semite is derived from Shem. Shem is Noah's oldest son. And he is obviously a forefather of Abraham. But then not only the children of Israel, but also all other descendants of Abraham through Ishmael and Isaac are actually descendants of Shem. Yet anti-Semitism implies that only the Israelites should be attributed to Shem. Why would a Jewish person, a scholar for that matter, somebody who knows history anyway, would pick that term, anti-Semitism, when he meant anti-Judaism, anti-Jewishness, anti-Jews? Why would you pick that? So anti-Semitism is actually supposed to mean anti-Jewishness. But because the way it was picked up, anti-Semitism is a form of racism, the name of which is itself can be described as racist. It just decided to exclude all those other descendants of Shem and effectively just apply, confine, or pick only the Israelites to be kind of linked to Shem. Anti-Semitism and the special status it's given, among other forms of racism could not have been exceptionalized without the support of the US. Even if a country in Europe would have wanted to do that, the US, had it been fair about justice and not having this unconditional commitment to Zionism, etc., it could not have become the exceptional form of racism that it is. So I spoke about Zionism, anti-Semitism. Let me get to the Holocaust now. The Holocaust is a terrible, terrible episode in human history. Millions, of course, of Jews suffered the Holocaust. And it's only right, of course, to talk about it, to remind people of what happens, what could happen, what people could actually end up doing to their kind of fellow human beings, and in large numbers. But unfortunately, the Holocaust, just like anti-Semitism, it's been abused. Used properly, but it's also been abused to justify Zionism. It has been exceptionalized as a crime against humanity. So, in history, even more recent history, we can talk about all kinds of genocide that happened and continue to happen in various places of the world. What's happening right now in Palestine is genocide. It's committed by those who claim, well, they are, a lot of them, descendants of victims of the Holocaust. But what's happening in Israel right now in Palestine is a form of genocide. So, exceptionalizing the Holocaust can only mean you're actually considering the victims of the Holocaust as more victims than any other victims of genocide. Their victimhood is greater, as if their life has higher value than the value of the lives of other people who suffered different genocides. There is actually, as everybody knows, denying the Holocaust is a crime in so many countries. And of course, denying the Holocaust is dangerous. I accept that. But the same applies actually to denying other forms of genocide. Denying what happens in Palestine right now, and what happened in the past as well, as genocide, is very dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Because it allows us to continue and to keep on happening. Because it's not the most important genocide. It is important, but it's not really as important as the Holocaust. There is, to my knowledge, there is no other historical fact, and of course the Holocaust is a historical fact, the denial of which has been criminalized in so many countries anyway, the way the Holocaust denying the Holocaust has been. And that's just not right. If you want to be to kind of stand against genocide, you have to apply the same standards to all instances of genocide. If you want to stand against racism, you have to be anti-racism everywhere, all the time. You don't pick and choose. I'm going to stand. I am against, racist antisemitism, but I'm not as much against Islamophobia or racism against black people. You can't do that. Exceptionalizing the Holocaust over other genocides is a form of supremacy. Again, it could not have been done without the US. So let me kind of conclude this video by kind of just summarizing what I discussed here. Israel is it looks like a powerful country, huge military machine, can do what it likes. But that's really is a facade. Israel is a very small country, very limited in capability, cannot support its policies, its aspirations, its unfair, unjust, brutal actions. It cannot. It's only a facade. So Israel is not as powerful and influential as a lot of people make it out. Even now, as we speak, with this huge military machine that it has and the incredible gap in capability between Israel and whatever militants it claims it's fighting, even now, America is just sending weapons, shipping weapons all the time. The weapons that end up maybe killing some militants, but surely slaughtering countless more innocent children, women, old people, men. People are not even fighting. Everybody knows that. So it's not really, this is not about what we're seeing in Palestine. The genocide, the brutality, the mass killing is first and foremost an American achievement, an American action. And the Israelis are more like complicit in what's happening, not the other way around. Because the Israelis could not have done it without American support, power, capability. So Israeli supremacy is really nothing more one symptom of a far more dangerous disease, which is American supremacy. The mythical belief that America is chosen or exceptional. When talking about Israel or any other product of American supremacy, it really is important that we do not lose sight of the underlying disease and know and kind of identify things for what they are. Israel just is a product of American supremacy. Israel now, forget about ancient Israel and the Bible, whatever it says, whether you believe in it or not. Israel, the nation today, is the chosen nation of America, not of God. God has nothing to do with it. It's the chosen nation of America. It came into being and continued to be the way it is because of America. God existed all the time. America existed only in the last 500 years. So that it is the chosen nation of America. As for America, it's the chosen nation of itself. That's how arrogant it is. American chosenness, supremacy, exceptionalism is exceptionally dangerous. That's what is exceptional about America. That was history has been teaching us for centuries now. Thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.